It's really a pleasure to be here, and it's so nice to see my good friend and director, Dean Rodriguez. What I wanted to talk a little bit about tonight, and I do hope that it will be a rather interactive evening with lots of comments and questions. It's about architecture prizes and competitions. This is a field, as Professor Anthony mentioned, I've been involved in for many, many years. And I think it's something that's very interesting, not just from my point of view as someone involved in the organization, but also looking at what does it mean for our profession, for our education. What does it mean for individuals, whether they're practicing architects or students or emerging firms and fields? So what are we really rewarding, and why do we love these prizes? So let's take a look. Well, there's a lot of prizes to be won. I'm sure you know that. I think that what I can mention about my own experiences is the 15 years with the Pritzker Prize. I've seen all the deliberations of that jury, but I've also been in contact with other prize organizations, and I've seen a growth in prizes, not only in the fields of architecture and design, but also in other fields. I've even been called by the Julia Childs Foundation to consult with them on the establishment of a Julia Childs Award. And it's really interesting, although they are in different fields, there are commonalities across the board for prizes. And what I wanted to talk a little bit about tonight is, why are there more and more prizes? What do they mean? Are there some trends that we can see? And then I hope this resonates, especially with the students or the younger architects in the audience. If you're going to participate in a competition, or if you're going to vie for an award, what should you be looking at, and what type of mindset or critical eye should you have if you're going to approach that subject? So the first thing, when we look at awards and prizes, I always like to ask several questions. I think that not all prizes are created equal. And of course, they have many different professed purposes, but there are also purposes that we can see if we read between the lines. One thing is what the announced goal of the award is, but then there are other goals or other purposes that are kind of hidden. We also need to look at what is the procedure. Is it a reasonable procedure? Is it clear? Is it one that is rigorous in terms of how decisions are made? And we also should look at the history or evolution and take a closer look to see that if the prize is responding to the profession, to society, if it's doing what it says it will do, or what's happening. And then it's important, I believe, to look behind the prize. Who is sponsoring it? What is their reputation? What is their motivation? Is it an impactful prize? Does it do something? Does it change society? Does it change the way we see architecture? Does it do something to promote or to assist those who are winning the prize? And how much does it cost? Not only how much does it cost for those who may want to enter or try to vie for the prize, but how much does it cost to organize everything? Where does the money go? Does it go in the administration of the prize? Does it go to the winners? Does it go in publicity? So all of those things are important. And I'm not saying that there's one measuring stick that should tell us what is good and what is bad. I think those are very individual points of view. I, of course, have mine, and there are probably many different ones in the audience tonight. But I think these are issues that are good to look at and to try to understand. Now, when we look at competitions, it's sort of the same situation. But I think it does become a little bit more complex, because when a person or a team participates in a competition, it always is going to cost them something, time or money or effort. And I think that it's a little bit different, because if you're putting yourself in a situation, you should know what the context is. And therefore, all of these other things, like how many participants will be participating, who is the jury? Do I trust the jury? How many people are there? How will they make the decision? Now, why do we love prizes? Well, for those of you who don't know what this is, of course, this is Cracker Jack is a kid's candy. It's probably, I don't know if it's from the 60s or the 70s or even prior to that, or 40s or 50s. But it was a way to entice children to get their parents to buy it, was by having a surprise inside. And I'm sure you can think of chocolate candies and other things that nowadays, hollow candies that have a prize inside, or when you go to a fast food chain, sometimes they give little statues. So this idea of giving prizes is something that, well, we all like it. It makes us feel special. It makes us feel that we got something, we deserved it. Or maybe we didn't fully deserve it, but we're rewarded for something. Now, if we look at the history of prizes, it goes all the way back, well, back to the beginning of time, but we could even look to the time of Louis XIV or Napoleon of France. And both of these rulers gave out prizes. And the reason they did this was to focus the attention of people on the prizes and not argue amongst themselves. When they were preoccupied with little honors, they forgot that the power was in the hands of the ruler, and they forgot to argue with each other. In the same way, for Napoleon, it was a message to the people that they were important, but it was also a way to stimulate loyalty, or at least prevent mutiny. And I'm sure you know about Alice in Wonderland, and the name of her prize, or the prize here, is that's often called the Dodo Prize. And this is because, if you remember, in Alice in Wonderland, they were swimming, and after the swim, Dodo proposes that everyone run a race to get dried off. And so the participants began running and running and running, and at the end, everybody wins. Well, Alice distributed sweets from her pocket, and they were the prizes. Everybody was happy, but she didn't get a prize. So it's interesting here, there was no candy left over for her. So Dodo inquires, what else does she have in her pocket? And she only had a thimble. Well, Dodo requests it and gives her the thimble. Alice has the best prize of all. She has not a piece of candy, but a thimble. So we all like to receive prizes. As the founder or sponsoring agencies, or the grantor of prizes, the prize itself can grant prestige to that organization. It can confer upon them an aura, or can confer upon them some attribute that perhaps they didn't have up until that point. It may also be a way to influence a community, influence a society, a profession. So that is something that sometimes people who are granting prizes want to influence future behaviors or the understanding, for example, of the architectural profession and its role in society. Of course, prizes celebrate. They celebrate a field, they celebrate talent, they celebrate groups of people and individuals. It's also a way for a granting organization to create a legacy or be known throughout time or go down in history for supporting a good cause. A prize may be a way to inspire young people. It may be a way to inspire people to enter a profession or change their behavior. For example, to hire a good architect rather than do it themselves. Now, I think a lot of prizes nowadays have the purpose of raising money. And this is something, it's not always bad, it's not always good. If we look at not-for-profit organizations, sometimes they grant awards, and they organize a wonderful dinner or an event, or it's a way to encourage people to be part of a group. And that's a way also to get them to donate or raise money. And then prizes can enhance our reputation. It can be something, if we look to the Pritzker Prize, well, maybe you didn't know the name Pritzker before the prize. Some people did, but it certainly is a way that the name can become known and can enhance the reputation of the organization or the family. Now, recipients also enjoy getting prizes, and if we look carefully at these, well, it always feels good, as in the case of Alice in Wonderland. It grants stature among peers or among a group of people. We can rise above somehow the madding crowd when we receive an award. It's a way to grant credibility to an idea or a person. We become part of a distinguished group of past recipients. And I also think we have to be honest with ourselves, and sometimes we hope that winning an award will result in a job. I think this is something often architects think if they win an award, people will be knocking down their door and asking them to undertake new commissions. And this doesn't always happen. It doesn't always happen. And later I can give you some comments on, if you want to know about different Pritzker Prize winners, who received jobs and who didn't. But there are certainly opportunities to lecture, to travel, to be on other juries. And sometimes there's money. And if we look at the architectural prizes that we can, that exist in the world, money is not always a huge amount, as in the case of the Nobel Prize. Nobel Prizes, of course, are $1 million and even more. In the field of architecture, I think the richest purses are around $250,000. And the Pritzker Prize is still only $100,000, as it was when it was established. Now, here are some major awards that have been around for a while and are quite respected in the field of architecture. And the thing that all of these awards have in common is the jury that grants the award is considered experts in the field. So in other words, for all of these awards, the decision is made by a small group of people who evaluate the candidates and then come to a decision by whatever means that is, whether it's discussion or voting or polling others. But they come to a decision and grant the award to a winner or winners. Now, they all have slightly different purposes. And in the case of the RITA Gold Medal, this one, of course, is long established, and it's granted by the Professional Association of the Royal Institute of British Architects in Great Britain. It is open to the international community. However, the majority of winners over the past 150 years, the majority have been British citizens. And it goes to a person. Recently, it did go to two people I believe on one or two occasions, but it really, up until recently, it has been for one individual who's seen as outstanding. The AIA Gold, I'm sure you know about this, and this is, of course, granted similar to the Royal RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects. It goes to an individual. Now, it's usually a living individual. In recent past, it's gone to someone who was not living. And I think it's interesting to look at the AIA Gold, and I invite comments and questions or dialogue a little bit later on, because I think the AIA Gold, in my mind, on one hand, it reflects what's happening in terms of the architectural panorama in the United States, but it also is reflecting the direction of the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, and the concerns that this professional organization has. Now, the Aga Khan Award is one that's granted every 3 years. And this goes to projects, but not just to the building. It goes to a whole group of people involved in the building, the architects, the clients. It could even go to the community of users. And the Aga Khan Award, when it was established in 1979, it wanted to somehow shine a light on Islamic architecture. And I believe recognizing that the history had been very remarkable and very significant, wanted to bring into the present an understanding and inspire contemporary architecture that would somehow respond to the Islamic world in a more direct or a more recognized way. And this, of course, is paid for by the Aga Khan. And it's a very complex process where technical teams go out and visit buildings and document them. Then they come back and there are different committees that look at this. And then finally is a master jury that selects the final winners. One very positive aspect about the Aga Khan Award is that it's not just the prize, but it also documents the works, and those are donated to Harvard University. There's a wonderful database and a lot of material that's there. They also have a professorship. So education, not just through the prize, but through collateral actions, is also something very positive about this. Now, the Premium Imperiale, It's a global award, and it's granted annually by the Japan Art Association. Again, there are nominators around the world who send in nominations, and it's become one of the most important international awards of the arts. Now, it's not just architecture. It's for painting, sculpture, architecture, music, and theater and film. And in this case, in this image, you can see David Chipperfield is receiving the award. Dominique Perrault received it in 2015, and other architects such as Taniguchi, Ricardo Legorreta, or Henning Larsen of Denmark have received it. And the Richard A. Driehaus Award, you probably know this because this is an award that is housed at Notre Dame, and the jury meets at Notre Dame. And this is a prize which shines the light on architecture that is developed within the theme of classical architecture, or in the direction of classical architecture. He also endowed a prize for architectural criticism along with the Richard H. Driehaus Prize. You probably have seen that he passed away just a couple weeks ago. I think he was a person who was very committed to the built environment. I find that, in my own personal opinion, is that there was sometimes confusion about what is classical architecture today. Is it the image of classical architecture? Is it something deeper? And although his prize purse for the prize was $250,000, I think that it's a prize that perhaps has not been that well known internationally because of its more narrow focus. And then finally, the Pritzker Prize. Of course, this is the one that I know best. And it was started in 1979, the same year that the Aga Khan Award was started. And it's really interesting because it does have the name of a family from Chicago. And it is given, as you can see, for a body of built work to a person or persons. And I think that this is interesting. And if you have a chance to take a look at the website, to go look over the years and see the change in the jury citations, which is the message that the jury writes and imparts when they make a decision to explain why they've chosen one architect or architects rather than others. Now, as you know, the Pritzker is it's quite a private process, and I can tell you what I can tell you if we have time for discussion. But the decision is made by a jury of independent people. Now, they do not reflect any organization. They only reflect themselves. The Pritzker family does not participate in any jury deliberation meeting. They have never asked me even for the list of nominees. They do not participate in any way. Richard Driehaus was on his jury and did participate in the deliberations. The AIA jury and the RITA jury members, they are individuals, but the prize is sponsored by the professional association. So therefore there is a different type of context and pressure. Now, for the jury, you can see here that the Pritzker Prize jury members are not all practicing architects. They may be practicing architects like Aravena, Sejima Wangshu, Benedetta, Deborah Burke. They're also, some of the practicing architects are also academics. And then we have Stephen Breyer, who is a justice in the Supreme Court of the United States, who reflects the public. He was the client for the building of different courthouses, especially the federal courthouse in Boston. So he understands architecture from the point of view of the client. Andre Correia do Lago is a Brazilian diplomat, but he also is a curator and has done many exhibitions on 20th century architects, especially. Deborah Burke, of course, is dean at Yale, as well as a practicing architect. And Barry Bergdahl is a historian, professor, writer, and curator. So the jury is quite special in the case of the Pritzker. We've had business people on the jury. And the other thing that's interesting is that they serve for a minimum of 3 years and can serve for more than 3 years. So let me just tell you a little bit. The thing that the jury judges is real work. They, until last year, they visited an area, 1, 2, 3 countries, a region of the world, to look at architecture, to experience it. And the idea was to see not only the buildings of potential laureates, but understand the context, understand the history, and also to have a chance so that the jury members were together to develop a common language. Now, on the jury trip, which lasts about 8 days, 7, 8 days, they cannot deliberate about a potential prize winner. They can talk about architecture, building, food, traffic, cities, family, souvenirs, anything they want, but they cannot deliberate and discuss who should be a future winner. That's the only stipulation. The Pritzker Architecture Prize has what I like to call a lean and mean organization. As Professor Anthony mentioned, I stepped down just a few weeks ago. I will advise them until this summer, and there is a new executive director, Manuela Lucadazio. She used to work for the Venice Biennale, and she will devote part of her time, as I devoted part of my time. There's a director of communication who is a full-time person, and that's it. If we need help with the website or for design, then a Chicago firm is asked to collaborate on a project-by-project basis. If we need help with anything else for the ceremonies or that, it's contracted on a project-by-project based on need for the moment. So there's no big organization, there's no expensive staffing, there's no office. We do have an archive, which is very well cared for, but it's not open to the public, so it's not an intensive expense right now. And so the whole focus goes on helping the jury to make the best decision that they can. The nominations process is open, and this means that any licensed architect or anyone who has a serious interest in architecture is able to write to the executive director and suggest a name. In the past, I also wrote many letters asking people for advice, and I'm sure the new executive director will do the same thing. And this has been a great help with technology and emails and media, social media, because it's much easier to know what's going on in remote places now that we're connected through technology as we are tonight. And then, as I mentioned before, there's stability and change in the jury, and there's stability and change in the prize. The purpose of the prize is interpreted by the jury. It is for a body of built work that on one hand is of high quality in the art of architecture, and on the other hand is expressing consistent service to humanity. Now, what those phrases mean is up to the jury. And I have to say that there has been criticism. I'm sure you know about this, when the women students at Harvard complained that Denise Scott Brown had not been awarded the prize, and they petitioned that it be granted to her retroactively. I think personally that that criticism is an extremely powerful tool. It is something that not only keeps architecture in the public realm and an interesting topic for debate, it heightens awareness about the profession. But I also think that in the case of the Pritzker, it was instrumental in getting the jury to think about, what does the prize mean? How do they award it? And what is the message of the prize? Now, they didn't go back and retroactively recognize Denise Scott Brown for her work. They didn't do that. They did not want to overturn a previous group's work. And I personally understand that, since jury members reflect only themselves. It's not a court of law. It is the opinion of a group of people at a certain time and place. The current jury or the then jury, the jury when this criticism came out a few years ago, respected that. But I have seen that they are much more sensitive to issues that perhaps 5-10 years ago they didn't speak about. They're much more sensitive to it now. So I think it's very good, not only for the Pritzker, but for all prizes. And so what do we see in terms of trends in granting of awards? Well, I think I've seen in these past 5, 10, 15 years maybe, a trend for establishing new prizes for special categories, for types of buildings, the hotels award, the school award, different groups of people. There have been a lot more awards going to groups such as young architects or under 40 or women. Of course, we know there are materials, the steel award, the wood award, the concrete award, et cetera, et cetera. But then I think there's something which is new criteria. I think there's a general trend to say the architect as iconic building, as Starchitect, is no longer as relevant as we once thought it was. And now we have to look at the criteria as to why we are giving awards. So there's a bigger focus on such issues as sustainability, innovation in new materials, community service, social responsibility. Other criteria could be collaborative practices. So it's almost impossible to keep up with all the new awards. Now, the image that you see on the top right here is from Carla Juasaba. She was the first winner of the Italcementi Women in Architecture Award. That award only lasted 4 years, the company was sold and the award was terminated. And at the bottom, of course, you might recognize that it's the solar decathlon. And that, of course, is a very important award that brings with it the construction, and in this case of a single family house that has to respond to multiple criteria for sustainability. Another big trend that I see in awards is there's much less awarding a person for a career or for a building, but rather there's an emphasis on the invention or the innovation or the new idea. And one would be Lafarge Holcim. There's different categories. They're also for sustainability, but there are different regions in the world. And in the case of the one on the right, it's for water retention and treatment, and I believe this is in Mexico, and that was the gold winner in 2018. It's not so important who did it, but the idea and the impact of the new invention, the proposal, is what becomes important. And then I'm sure you know about the X prizes for suborbital flight, for robots. There's even been films made about some of these winning inventions. And they can be undertaken by experts, by academics, by high school kids, anybody really in the world who can get together and invent something to meet the criteria of the prize. So I think that we'll see more with a shared economy. I think that we'll see more prizes going to inventions, innovations, new concepts in architecture, prototypes, watch for 3D printing and things like that of buildings. And it won't matter so much if the architect behind it has a big name, is famous. The important thing will be, what is the impact or the advancement we see through the invention or the innovation. Now, if we look at competitions, as I mentioned before, the initial questions are similar, but I just wanted to give you two examples of architectural competitions where the result was for some sort of design or team. And one was the Guggenheim Helsinki, an open international design competition of 2014. And on the right, you see the winning design. And then the second one is, I have to say I'm biased, it's Renata, it's an invited selection process, which a colleague and I ran, and the winners were just announced, I believe it was the end of January, beginning of February of this year. And in the case of the Guggenheim, to me, it was astounding. 1,715 entries from 77 countries. Now, over 1,500 entries, I just can't even imagine how much work, how many hours went into that. And it followed rules that are common in Europe, that it had to be totally open and anonymous. It had an 11-person jury, and you'll see the names in a moment. The criteria sounded really good. It was looking at how to push the idea of a museum beyond the tradition. It sounded great that the shortlisted designers would be invited to visit the site. And the prize was 100,000 euros and then 5 runners-up. Now, the difficulty was there was no guarantee to build the museum. Here are the 6 images from the 6 finalists. And what happened? Well, encourage you to take a look at the websites. Wonderful jury, everything sounded great. Never got built, never will get built. Helsinki decided that they did not need or want to spend the money to have an outpost of the Guggenheim as Abu Dhabi or Bilbao have. And it was up to them. It is up to the city to make that decision. So therefore, after the competition, there was great debate, and everything was canceled. The ideas were canceled. It wasn't without debate. And if you look at the next Helsinki.org, Michael Sorkin created a Salon Refusé, an alternative competition in protest, as he often did, in a rebellious sense, which I think could have shown us that it may not have been smooth sailing, and it wasn't smooth sailing. The RITA competition through the Center for Sustainable Cities that at my school, as I mentioned, a colleague and I defined this process based on the belief that all competitions have to respond to the client, the context, the moment, the budget, all of that. So this is a two-phase competition, and it wasn't for a final project, but it was for a multidisciplinary team, their ideas and strategies to reactivate a central space in Madrid. And I have to say, the thing that took the longest was not the competition itself, really. It was getting the client. It was a group of private real estate developers, getting that group to understand and come to terms with what their goals were, and to have a vocabulary that meant the same to all of them. They all said family-oriented, sustainable, reactivate. But what does this mean? And so it took time to talk to them about that. I have to say they were wonderful clients, because the first phase was very simple RFQ, very short, and about 30 firms were invited from around the world. They were not paid. But the second phase, the finalists, the 5 finalists, were paid for their proposals and their efforts. And in this competition, we didn't require anything. We didn't say you have to hand in plans, sections, site plans, budget, anything like that. They had to hand in a PowerPoint, maximum 20 slides, and up to 6 pages of strategy. But then they had to do a remote or a hybrid presentation to the clients. And the purpose of that was so that the client could see the working method and get to understand who the team members are. Well, in this case, a team led by Diller Scofidio Renfro with Catherine Gustafson of Gustafson Bowman, and Fermín Vargas, architects of B720 from Barcelona. Those 3 teams together, those 3 firms together, are the lead, along with sustainability experts, botanists, lighting experts, social animators, etc. You can see on the left, Athka, it's kind of, these pictures don't show you the worst areas, but it's kind of a chopped up area. The original intention was that it be like Rockefeller Center. It never was. It's not used now because it's really not accessible. And on the right, you see the site plan and one of the images from the winning proposal. So now for my suggestions to students and my and young architects, how do you decide to participate in a competition? Well, as we said before, look at all of these things, understand what's behind the competition before you jump into it. I would say, for me, the most important things are to know, what is my purpose? What do I want by participating in a competition? Do I want to be recognized? Do I want something for my CV? Do I want the experience of collaborating with my fellow students or fellow colleagues? Do I want to try something new and see how it will work? Am I experimenting with an idea in architecture and want to put it into practice? What is the procedure? Does it seem reasonable what the competition guideline is asking for? How will it be judged? When I think of the Helsinki one, and I'm thinking 1,700 plus projects, 11 jury members, how much time did each jury member spend looking at 1,700 projects? I mean, did they spend 5 minutes? Did they spend an hour? Teams spent months working on this. 1,700 hours of each person is incredible amount. It's like a year's worth of work. So look at the procedure in a competition. If there are 500 entries, what is the jury going to do? How long will they look at your project? What will they look at? Will it be online? Will they talk together before coming to a decision? What is the criteria? And then I think the worst case and best case scenarios is what you have to figure out. If I lose, what is the worst thing that can happen? I lose this, I'm not in the finalists, I've spent the last 3 months in X amount of money and I've done all of this. Is that your worst case scenario? Or will it be that you feel defeated because you weren't understood or your proposal wasn't seen as a finalist? What's the worst thing that can happen to you? And what's the best? Is it winning? Is that really the best scenario? Or is it having fun with your colleagues, doing something together? Is it showing your professor that you really can do this? So think about that from a very personal point of view. And I think there are these red flags. Do not, my advice, if they don't tell you who the jury is, do not participate. Something's wrong there. If the jury votes online and they don't talk to each other, that's another red flag. It's not serious. If you don't know what the criteria is, if you have no idea of what they're looking for or looking at. And in the past, were there lots of winners from the same city, the same organization, or the same school? Maybe this is because it's skewed in one direction. There's no clear incompatibility policy. By this, I mean, can members of the organizing committee, or can students of jurors, or can colleagues of jurors, can they participate in the competition? If they're asking you for money just to enter, look very, very carefully, because one thing is a small fee for administration, a website, organizing materials, maybe paying the jury, taking care of the technical considerations. It costs money. But if the only people paying for this are the participants, there's no sponsoring organization, there's no company behind it that's reputable, then you might want to consider, are they really running the competition for you, the participant, or for themselves as a way to make money? And your ideas, if they're not protected in some way. I just saw a competition on the website asking for redoing ideas to redo a house, and they would pay, the first prize would be a small amount of money, but it would be an award for the winning idea. But there was nothing to say that the owners who wanted their house redone couldn't take any idea from anybody and just apply it freely and interpret it in their own way. And this is not fair for architects. And then look at the history, because maybe the projects that have won in the past are not of the quality, and maybe you don't want to be in that group. So, and then finally, the questions I have on the left-hand side are again, these personal questions that I think everybody should answer before they jump into a competition. I remember that Rem Koolhaas said that in the beginning, when OMA was established, they got most of their work through competitions, but I think they won something like 15 to 20% of the ones they participated in. It was a huge, huge investment. And nowadays, many firms like OMA and others do not participate in open competitions at all. And if they participate in limited competitions, they really, really carefully judge about their chances to win. And I don't think they do it for free anymore. So these are just some suggestions that I have for you, and I hope it's been useful. I'm more than happy, as my colleagues, Professor Anthony and others know, I'm extremely candid and open, and I do appreciate any sort of questions. I don't know who will win the Pritzker next year, and I can't tell you about the private conversations of the jury, but almost anything else I will certainly try to respond to. Thanks very much.